Going live in 5. Well, it says preparing, setting up. We're going live now.
Great. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to see your faces or names pop up on our screen, and Happy New Year to everyone. Just as a reminder, before we do welcomes from our co-leads, just want to remind you to silence your phone. We are streaming live via YouTube, so everyone can participate in these crazy days of COVID and illness. We don't want the work to slow down, but we just want to remind you, you are live, and this will be archived and placed on our website as well. So I'm actually going to start off because we do have all 3 co-leads, and I don't know that all 3 are able to stay the whole time because today is the beginning of session. So let the fun begin. I'll start with Dr. Thompson, if you want to start, and then you can turn it over to each of the co-leads before you turn it over to me. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Thanks. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Joette. All those that actually put the work into this, I appreciate it. We had a very productive year last year, folks. So welcome back to this year, and we're going to continue this work. I want to thank, first of all, Lieutenant Governor and Commissioner Glass. What great partners. I have to tell you that every chance I get to talk about this, and whatever venue I'm in, I talk about this, and it's powerful. I will also say that we've gotten a lot of attention on what we're doing here. Nationally, I've talked about it, and within the state. So I think it is important that we do all that we can do to make sure we live up to what we argue that this is really for. We're going to continue our conversations today to talk about the recommendations of the work groups, which I thought were excellent recommendations. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the budgetary and legislative work and the ask that we have over this next year to keep our work going. One of the pieces that I want to say, I guess, before I turn it over to see if Commissioner Glass wants to say something, is that I think it is important that we take this on this year, probably doubling down on what we did last year. I thought we were very energized, very motivated, and came up with a lot of stuff, but we need to go deeper now. We need to go down to some nitty gritty, and we need to get some things done. I know for me at CPE, I want to look at what policies and things we can change to make it far more of a friendly environment for this work that we're doing. And I'll leave it up to my other 2 co-leads to make their statements about that. But I know from my vantage point, that's one of the things that I want to really do. I have my board chair on here. I see he's muted, but I think he's here with me in this way of thinking about it. So part of what I would ask us to do is to look at, from our vantage point, what we can do to really, if the things that doesn't cost us anything but a little time to make happen, that we do that. Commissioner Glass, sir, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Dr. Thompson. Happy New Year to you as well. And I'll just pay the compliment back. It's been wonderful to work with you and the team at CPE and all of the work that they've done helping to coordinate these. I think that we made a lot of progress this past year and coming up with a set of really solid and well-vetted recommendations. And of course, now the work that's at hand, just as we sort of start to emerge from the haze of the holidays, is to go right into this legislative session and see what we can do to bring about some statutory changes and some resource changes to bring those recommendations into life. That's exciting, and it's a testament to the group that's come together and the capabilities and the input of all of the people that are here. But it's not easy to bring a group with this kind of firepower and horsepower together and keep them focused. And so what we want to do now going forward is think about what's next. How do we deliver on some of the things that we have identified as priorities? How do we establish some statutory changes, some resources to bring those into being? And then also, what are the next steps that we want to take, considering that we don't want to overextend ourselves. We want to keep this momentum going. And I also want to express my appreciation for the Lieutenant Governor being part of this effort. She's our third partner, and having her involved and the governor's office involved has been really important as well. I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Lieutenant Governor and I, we've had some opportunities to have conversation. I see Susan is here too. And I want to tell you, it's been quite refreshing to have people at the top of our executive branch really buying into this education stuff. I guess I just want to say that from a guy who's been doing education, I think, as I look in this group, probably longer than most of you in Kentucky. But I will say that it's really refreshing. Lieutenant Governor, a few words, please.
She actually may not be able to log in because she is putting a sweet little girl to sleep right now for her nap time. So she may pop in a little bit. She's online, but she's working on napping time.
Well, when she pops in, we'll give her an opportunity. I'm sure she wants to say something. We'll give her an opportunity. So Amanda, I won't slow us down here any. I do want to thank all those that are representing, once again, personally, the higher ed piece of this agenda. Thanks for your work too. Amanda, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to try and share my screen again, but if it freezes, just somebody tell me and then we will take it down and continue our work. Let me share this here. And are you able to see today's agenda? Great. Okay, so what we're going to hit on today is what we were supposed to do in December, and December was a terrible time to meet. Most of you were not available or tentative, and so we bumped it to the day, but it really works out well. So we're going to talk just really briefly about the request and the work that has taken place and has started, and the request since the last time we met in September. So if you remember, we had work groups that made recommendations with some possible actions. You all gave your recommendations on prioritizing those and saying they're all important, but we really want you to emphasize this. So we took that to heart and we gave the document to the different agencies who would be able to start enacting this work. The work that we would like to continue is to engaging more of you who are representing multiple roles of how we can share the word, how we can advocate for the work and really come together for implementation purposes. So exactly what Dr. Glass and what Dr. Thompson has said is this is just the beginning of the work. It's a good place. And I will tell you some of the conversation that we had in July when these recommendations were starting to come together was Dr. Thompson and actually Dr. Liu Young were like, these are kind of like not very inspiring. And I'm like, I know, I said, but there are some things that we have to do that are just low-hanging fruit to get it started that we should have already been doing. And then we get to the even more inspirational. And their words, their feedback that day did not just fall on that day. That has been with me the whole time thinking about how do we really push this forward. And so when we had a conversation with you all last time and the feedback you provided, the feedback from the work groups was how we move forward with going deeper, to be more innovative, to really have those lever changes. And I feel like where we started last year was a good place where we're moving, and we want you to see where the agencies are moving, what they're asking for and the actions they're taking, and then where do we go from here. So that's how we're going to run today. I'm going to run through these briefly, and I apologize if it's too quick, but this is a review really for you. And for you to be able just to kind of get the fog away, as Dr. Glass said, to remember. So from the, excuse me, successful transition to post-secondary, the number one recommendation was employ more post-secondary transition advisors to help students plan for and transition to post-secondary education. This was your all's top priority and said, gosh, all these things are super important, but we need more help. So I want you to see what's going on with that. So 2 of the action steps that are taking place is that we are actually asking, CPE is asking for $4 million to really come and have more sustainability in a statewide program to strengthen post-secondary transition advising practices through local communities of practice, national networks, and really place an emphasis on college and career coaches using our family resource centers and youth service centers and our resources within our school. If you see the next piece is what we're actually really grateful that we're getting ready to implement in the process, especially is the Kentucky Advising Academy for comprehensive series of face-to-face and virtual, probably starting more virtual, professional learning and resources centered on college and career advising, with our post-secondary partners. This is in partnership with AmeriCorps, and you can see that CPE and KDE are in partnership with this to get this work going right away. We were really grateful for our GEAR funds that we had before, and then we had ARP funds also granted to us, one from the cabinet and then one from KDE that we are really grateful for, to work together to start building the capacity and the conversations around the importance of college and career advising. So that's some of the work that's already starting to happen based on the work you all recommended. And you'll see where the work goes through and what we would hope to have with the funding or any of the changes. The second recommendation was to create a comprehensive communications campaign to better equip high school students with the necessary knowledge to successfully transition. We talk about that there's just sometimes they don't know what they don't know, and there's a lot to know. So we did, in collaboration with KDE, work with them on piloting a letter to the seniors, high school seniors, on just minimum GPA eligibility for admission, and set up just a process for them to be able to access the enrollment page or the admissions pages for our public institutions. This only went out to a few districts to try it out to see if we picked the appropriate communication mechanisms. I can tell you in less than a month, we had 700 hits just from only having maybe 3 or 4 districts. So we're going to dig deeper in with the districts and learn more, but we're really hoping to expand this work. And we really appreciate the partnerships with KDE and the use of how we can communicate with all students in our, at least right now, our public schools, and to be able to see how we can expand it even further. And then we also had, in an action step, was creating a statewide web-based resource hub for targeted audiences to access resources, information regarding post-secondary opportunities, the institution's career pathways, financial aid. And we already have a project that we've kicked off with KY Stats and KDE and CPE. And you can see where we have funds. CPE has donated or contributed funds, KY Stats, ESSER dollars have gone in. We've had staff hired to start building out this this hub or this platform for more of a one-stop shop. This was brought up multiple times by the work group, saying it's not even friendly to ask somebody to go to 6 or 7 different sites when they don't even know where they're going. So we're really working to be intentional with our audiences and what resources are available, and to collaborate so we're not making it difficult for the user, whether that be a high school student, an adult learner, a military veteran, families, whatever that may be. And so really, really grateful again for that work that's already getting started. So recommendation 3 was the statewide cross-agency campaign to improve FAFSA completion rates and access to FAFSA data for schools and districts. Many of us heard from districts saying we didn't even know we could access that data to know the progress of FAFSA completion. KIA really took this, this is a lot of their work of what they do. And so they really took this under their wing. And they've already started a cross-agency committee with many of our agencies and communication folks to figure out how we can best communicate FAFSA completion, provide support to families, and to work with the school districts and counselors to talk through how to monitor the progress, know which students have started their FAFSA forms, those who have not, different outreach opportunities, and really to engage in completion as a state, as a holistic approach, instead of just with KIA trying just to get their coaches out there, but really collectively promoting that. And that is ongoing, no additional funds needed. It was just being more collaborative, and they have taken that lead, and we are very grateful. For recommendation 4, expanding institutional capacity to support students. So we talked about increasing summer bridge programming. So we're getting ready to work on that RFP for the grants for summer bridge programming for our institutions, private and public, as well as our 2-year and 4-year institutions are included. We had a pretty good turnout last year, but it was late in the game. So we're really hoping to have a better, more robust summer bridge programming for more students, and be able to support the universities and the colleges as they build some sustainability processes, and hopefully learn some different strategies for engaging students early to really be successful as they make that transition. And you can see where we had GEAR funds that we received from that, as well as ARPA funds, which will help sustain that work through September 2023. And this is not just summer bridge where they come in the summer, but it's also sustained support into that fall semester as they transition and become a college student, whether it be a commuting student or those who live on campus, whatever that may be, really provide that support during that transition. For early post-secondary opportunities, in this number one recommendation was your role's number one focus. And so wanting to have students every student have at least one early post-secondary opportunity and the support to successfully complete, particularly those students and families who have been traditionally underrepresented in early post-secondary opportunities. We're going to talk more about that today on who are we talking about exactly. But a couple of the actions we've talked about is really ways to identify students using data, how to establish and scale partnerships, and advantages of EPO opportunities. So this is not just dual credit, but it's also AP, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, career pathways and completions with certifications, Cambridge. There's lots and lots of ways to earn articulated credit. There's lots of ways to earn credentials and college credit for early post-secondary opportunities that we can really expound on. And there is a real need for guidance and support for implementation. We have a lot of turnover that happens with folks who tend to schedule students and work on this. And so we can't assume people already know. So we are going to be much more intentional on the resources that are provided and guidance. The other piece we'll be working on more towards the fall is guidance on the availability of EPOs and how those transfer. Lots of questions are always on credits that count and that really align with the gen ed, and it's not random credit or duplicated if they've already taken an AP. So this is really to be intentional and to increase the advising and support around effective early post-secondary opportunities for students that really benefit them. Recommendation number 2 is increase state funding to cover the cost of early post-secondary opportunities for all students, including equity grants for low and middle income students and families. There aren't specific actions being pursued at that time around this. We already know there's some legislation around dual credit scholarship and the work ready scholarship that's being discussed. And so this recommendation, there's no action this time, but as you can see, there are a lot of moving parts. So you can't do it all in one year, but these are definite actions that the agencies have claimed. Recommendation number 3, strengthen local and regional partnerships among high schools, post-secondary institutions, and workforce to expand access, advising, and support of those early post-secondary opportunities. And we're going to be reestablishing the Dual Credit Advisory Council to really dig into the policy and really look at any of the bumps in the road that could cause barriers for students participating or thinking that they are eligible. So really looking at the criteria and how we revise that to make it more equitable and increase opportunity and access for our students. This has not been revised since 2016, I believe. And so there's a lot that's happened since then, including the dual credit scholarship and different opportunities. So it's definitely in need of revision. And so that will get started and really building out advising supports that go along with the revision of those policies. And then the educator workforce and diversity, KDE leads pretty much all of this work. We are a part of that as a partner with some of this, but they have a lot of things going on. The first recommendation was launch a compelling campaign that highlights the importance and benefits of entering the teaching profession. And you can see they have a lot going on. Continue to promote the Go Teach KY. If you've not been on Facebook to see it or Twitter, it will constantly come up, and they've done a really good job of saturation. They're going to increase the media and all different platforms, Ed Rising newsletter and the educator development newsletter. So they're really looking at continuing to promote that and on processes and communications they've already built, broaden reach through the production of creative and innovative PSAs and Go Teach KY Frenzy. You probably already know they have each year, the Teacher of the Year, Kentucky Teacher of the Year has the opportunity to take a sabbatical and be in the KDE on the KDE team for either a semester or a year. And so a lot of times they're a great testament. And I can tell you the new Kentucky Teacher of the Year has already been on Twitter and really is quite an advocate for teaching. And then the Promote Why I Teach podcast features teachers in the field in various career stages. So these are just some efforts that are already happening, and you hopefully will see more about that. And I'll definitely turn this over in a few minutes to our co-leads if they would like to share any additional insight. For recommendation number 2, this was your all's top priority, and I can tell you there are 7 action steps that the KDE team shared with us on what they're doing, the funding they have committed to this. So one of them is provide funding for substitute or service for teacher support paraprofessional teacher engagement, and the pipeline to support development implementation for the use of substitutes and pre-service teachers and paraprofessionals. They're putting quite a bit of money into that. That's kicking off this month. Implement project early entry plan, encourage supportive innovative efforts of schools to improve the pipeline of teaching, the teaching learning pathway participants, and introductory opportunities into the profession for middle and high school students. You'll see that that doesn't start for another year, so my apologies. But they're in the works of providing that. Dallas Kretzer has shared with us a few times on how they are working with the military, and they're working with the JRROTC. I don't remember that part, Dallas. You might have to fill that part in, but pursuing teaching opportunities, specifically in computer science. They're looking at filling the roles of CTE fields, especially those whose jobs when they were in the military aligned with those same type of career and technical education fields, and meeting specific needs. They are looking for all kinds of grants, and this is really modeled after their state police initiative with military police and that transition. Quite innovative and exciting. And then to continue this recommendation, you can see number 4, grow your own grants. They have administered that with $500,000 in WIOA funds. And so that is to really help build out interest for high school students. Regulatory changes were proposed for the practice validity timeline. EPSB did recently update the regulation, but we are in conversations with how to best go about looking at the impact of that and if there's any additional changes that need to happen. So those conversations have definitely started. Provide cultural competence facilitator training through the education cooperatives for all K-12 districts. CPE and KDE are working really closely together on providing this type of training that is more specific to adults, and just being culturally competent of their students and the environment in which they work. We are using the A to the 4 model that Dr. Thompson wrote as part of his research, and A to the first model, or A to the 1, which is the first piece of the model, has already been trained and disseminated and has just gone over extremely well. Your co-ops have folks who have been designated to work on this work, and they are an excellent group throughout the state. We're really impressed and excited. These efforts will continue for a while, as it's not a fast thing, but it is really growth and development, and it has just been very well received. And then the administer Commonwealth Educator Diversity Program grants to promote innovative strategies for recruiting and retaining teacher candidates. There was WIOA funds that were provided for this. There were 6 applicants, 3 of which were administered or were awarded the grant. Western Kentucky University, University of Louisville, and Northern Kentucky University will be implementing their strategies to work on diversifying their teacher candidates, and we hope to learn from them because all 3 institutions have very different approaches, but we're really encouraged by what they offer and what we can learn. And then recommendation number 3 is increase teacher and administrator retention and advancement opportunities with attention to underrepresented groups. So this is, again, what KDE is already doing, where they've put money. You'll notice their ESSER dollars, and I'm sure Dr. Glass can speak to this, $2.8 million to begin in the fall of 22 to continue and expand new teacher support programs. This was the conversation that's been had multiple times around the lack of KTIP support, mentoring for new teachers, and really helping to sustain them in the field to really retain them and build their capacity. As we know, the first few years are really tough, and just teaching in general is not for the weak. So, really having that support is important, and that was a top priority. KDE felt the same as using a nice amount of money from their ESSER dollars. Continue to provide national board support, which include professional learning and teacher networks. The impact survey, which used to be called the TEL survey, it's the KY impact survey. So districts can use their data around school climate and culture to focus on retention strategies and advancement for their teachers based on their perceptions of the school environment in which they work. And then ensure all K-12 educators have access to the CATE competency models to assist in the development of a more effective and equitable practices to meet the needs of students. This is a great professional learning approach for this. So lots and lots of work that's happening in this space that's already started. So some of the funds that you saw that are going to be requested have to come through the agencies. Obviously, they can't come from the Continuum, but we're not waiting for that. We are moving along. And so part of the work of this coming year will be focused on keeping updates on implementation, where we are with this, where we may have bumps in the road, where we need your help advocating for things or sharing the message. And so that's kind of just the start based on what your recommendations were last year and what the agencies have already embraced and moving forward with, which we're very, very grateful for. So I'm going to stop there for a second and see if Dr. Thompson or Dr. Glass would like to share any insight into additional information, any questions that the members may have. I know I went through that quickly, but it's the same thing we did in September. I just didn't want to waste your time, but I wanted to remind you and to let you know where the agency stood, because at that point, they had not had an opportunity to submit what their work was already, where they were planning to go, or the recommendations you made that help launch into some new work. So Dr. Glass or Dr. Thompson?
I don't have anything to add. Amanda, thank you for covering that. We're excited about the work that we have underway. A lot of the recommendations that came out of the Continuum fit nicely with the work that we received funding for the governor's office on, or that we used our federal COVID relief money to move forward. Of course, that's time limited, but we'll hopefully can make a case with the dollars and time that we have available that these are important and necessary actions.
Yeah, same, Amanda. As you all know, and Commissioner, appreciate the money you helped us to get from the federal dollars. I do want to say that we're doing some other things like on, building a diverse workforce. We are getting ready to redo Kentucky State University's education college to do mainly that in a heavy way. We're going to be working with several of our post-secondary institutions also, along with Simmons, to do some of this work. That's only an example of a few of the things that we're focusing on. We are also working heavily with the legislature. I don't see Representative Tipton on here today, but in looking at how we can better use the current system that we have in a more focused way. My board, and once again, Luke's on here, but my board, we bring this information to our board to get their input all the time. And we're going to be doing a whole lot more around the issues of financial literacy, a whole lot more in transparency, the connections with a variety of the other things that we're doing. So, no, I really, Amanda, I thought you did a good job. I do want to give Luke, who's on here as a board chair, just an opportunity to say something about whatever he wants to from our board while you're here. I know Lou is on here too, and then Jason, I'm not sure if you want to have her do the same, but I do want them to have some statement, I guess, at the beginning of the year on this conversation.
Sure, and Lou's asked a question about how we're going to go about these legislative asks as well. So Lou, why don't we have you come on and just express some of your thoughts about the things that you've heard and actions that the state board is considering in support of this.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. Just listening really carefully today to try to discern where we are in terms of the report that Amanda gave about prioritized recommendations and some funding that has been available funding that has been attached. But I also didn't want to leave the conversation without another rally for us to collaborate on advocacy. I'm still lamenting that statement I made about not being very flashy or splashy in our recommendations, but the splashy part for me has been what Aaron and Jason mentioned earlier, and that is that we've got some really some power brokers at the table who are attempting to row in the same direction, and so to lose that chance for us to collaborate and advocate jointly around the needs of students from cradle to grave, I think would be remiss. So that would be my question. I would just add my thanks to everyone for sticking with us through the entire process. We use metaphors in education all the time, and one of the famous ones is about not letting kids fall through the cracks. And the largest of those cracks happens when a girl turns 18 and makes decisions that either take her on to post-secondary or not, or at any point in life, folks face a huge crack, almost a chasm when it comes to lifelong learning. So I think we have taken steps together to lock arms and to fill in those cracks for learners across Kentucky, and I'm really proud of that work. I'll turn it over to Luke.
And then before Luke jumps in, I want to answer part of your question, Lou. We've been talking with the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor on really getting some of these things in their budget ask as well as their agenda. And I think, and if Lieutenant Governor comes on, maybe she can give us an update on that. But I'm also asking those in the House and Senate Ed to give Jason and me at least the opportunity to come to the table and discuss some of this P20 work, the need of building a stronger pipeline toward building a stronger workforce and a stronger economy. And I think that will happen. Now, without a doubt, I think each of us are trying to coincide. We probably haven't done nearly as good of a job as I would have liked. Coincide our ask from each of our respective units to the legislature. There's going to be some things I'm going to be advocating for that Jason has in his, even though we may not have collaborated on those asks, but I think would help build the pipeline. I hope he would do the same with me. But, you know, I think so. I mean, I do this as a part of also the Board of Education, to be honest with you, Lou. So a part of what we've done is we've advocated both in the executive and in the legislative branch a way for us to get a few of these things recognized in a manner that develops it. But once again, Lieutenant Governor, but I see Susan is on here, and I don't think Mary Pat Regan is on here. But just like the healthcare pipeline, what we can do in that, we're looking at some joint efforts, especially to get more people of color engaged in that process. So we have, and we could probably do a whole lot better, Lou. I think I take what you're saying as from the Kentucky Board of Education as a way for us to figure out how we can probably at least have some elevator speeches at the very minimum as we go into the season.
Yeah, it's easy for each of us to advocate for our own silo and then lose the patchwork, the weaving, the whatever metaphor makes sense there in the advocacy process. And I just want to make sure we keep that in the front of mind. They gavelled in at noon, so we are off to the races.
We are definitely off to the races, and I've been having conversations all last week and this week. Without a doubt, they're off. Luke, sir.
Excellent. Well, Lou, those were great points, and Dr. Thompson, likewise. My primary focus last year and this year was really on financial literacy, which I see as one of those strings that helps students not fall through the cracks, as well preparing them for, to be an active member of the workforce. I'm a professional planner, so I always say, and Aaron's heard me say it, nothing happens without a plan. And I'd love to see more students have a plan of how are they going to pay for that secondary education, whether that's a certificate, an associate's degree, 4-year, 6-year, degree, whatever it may be. But get that education and an actual plan. I'm a CARA kid, right? Remember the writing portfolios. And Dr. Ellis and I have talked about this. I'd love to see something like that for these students that starts in the 9th grade or maybe even sooner. That we already have a lot of financial education out there. I'd like to put it in writing, right? Because an idea without it being right is just an idea. Writing it down makes the difference. And so that's one of the things I'd like to work towards, so that students can see that, just like we were saying with the minimum GPA, hey, you got the grades, you can go. Now you have a financial plan, you can go. It's not going to cost you, 6 figures. It's not going to, they get their heads filled with these horror stories, which are definitely the edge cases. And so that's one of the things that I'd really like to work together with this group and whomever else on putting in place some kind of structure so that these students see a path forward. And once they see the path forward, a lot of them, they're like, oh, I can go. I do have the, oh, I can afford it. great, now I'll go. So that's one of the primary focuses this year.
Thanks, Luke. And Susan, did you want to add something from Lieutenant Governor's office or anything? I'm using y'all liberally here. I hope you heard.
No, I appreciate that. I'm going to check with the Lieutenant Governor. I don't want to get ahead of her. So if she's able to get on and make a few comments, obviously it's better coming from her. If she is still putting Ev down for a nap and I have her permission, I'll go ahead. So I'll pop
Okay.
back to you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Amanda, I'm turning it back over to you now, please.
Yeah. So Lou, thank you for your question, because that's honestly a similar conversation we've had with a few people on this call, actually, that have said, it's in our legislative agenda to really advocate for our teacher workforce. And how can we do that collectively? And how can we be a powerful force? And what really is the ask? And so, I was asked to kind of check into what other states had done, and I have, and different states have asked for a task force to really look at the regulations around certification. Look at the criteria around what are we doing, and it's not just alt cert, but it's also traditional pass, but getting away from traditionally what we've always done. What really is working, and so I definitely think pulling together, to your point, some very specific points that even align to show the alignment of KDE has mentioned teacher workforce. KASS has mentioned teacher workforce. KASA has mentioned teacher, there's a lot. All of our schools, higher ed is saying teacher workforce. We got to have the kids prepared to come into higher education. If we don't have a strong workforce, it's going to impact our students. And it does impact our students. So to your point, Lou, I think that is a great way for us to pull together some very specific talking points and alignment of where that does fit. I can tell you, some states have really gone after, just to your example or your point, have really gone after really looking at what it is we want to improve. And is it a quick fix, a fast fix, or a long-term fix when we really look at the pathways for our future educators? So lots of folks are doing that, but what they don't have, honestly, is like a P20 council for people to be at the table to talk about it. And we do have that. So I appreciate your question. And that's something we can work on, and pulling that together and vetting that through the continuum sooner than later. I think that's something that can be a top priority for us to show alignment, that it's even identified in the agencies and within the conversation that we have, that is all aligned with the needs. That is very powerful. The other piece around what Dr. Thompson talked about is we are asking for over $4 million just in support around the advising piece and helping students with that transition. And so to your point around where we lose students, the fastest is where we are needing to build capacity, the greatest in our schools, and even with our post-secondary folks are coming together to share common language and how we do that transition, because we lose so many. And I will tell you, the conversation we had at a national meeting recently was that we are not losing them. And I've had it even with somebody on this call. We're not losing them from one university to the other or one college to another. We're losing them to home, and not even a job, just home. And so really digging into that takes us into where we're going next. And so what we have talked about from the very beginning of this is that our purpose for this continuum is to improve actions to ensure students can equitably earn the necessary degrees and credentials to enter the workforce successfully. And our objective this past year was develop and execute a specific plan to activate the biggest levers for increasing successful student transitions into post-secondary, whatever that may be. And so part of that, when we were digging into thinking about what comes next, so not only how do we work on the implementation of a lot of these recommendations, but it can't just stop at that 30,000 foot view, which is what Dr. Glass and Dr. Thompson have already mentioned, is that we have to go deeper, because if we really want to be strategic and intentional, we have to know more. And I think what we learned from our focus groups that we did last May is that there are lived experiences that many of us didn't even know about, that we don't consider or talk deeply about. And so it's time to go deeper into that and really take that into consideration. So what we have talked about doing, and I'm going to share my screen one more time, and I apologize for doing that, but I think it'll be easier for you to see, is that what we're going to do is propose these next steps, but it all aligns with what it is we're talking about. So are you able to see my screen? I just want to make sure. Okay. So the 2022 doesn't go away from and put new goals and new objectives. It goes deeper into what we've already started talking about and the lingering questions that remained in our work groups, because this is what continued to surface from our focus groups, from our families and students and staff from across the community members across the state, and what we were finding. And so we started the low hanging fruit of just some basic things we need in place, but this can take us further. And so these are just proposed. The topics, I think, in bold will be pretty set and we can add to or take away, but the metrics that are listed underneath really align, and this is just to start with the conversation, to the momentum metrics that ESG did a research project on. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to go deeper and to share this. But when we're talking about going deeper and we talk about early post-secondary opportunities, we haven't even talked about predictability of freshman GPA. So we talk about the importance of talking to students in middle school and high school, but there are predictive indicators that are we even using it and where are we with that? Success in early post-secondary education opportunities. I can tell you that we talked a lot with dual credit specifically about there being a low percentage of minority students who take advantage of dual credit. What we didn't talk further about is when you get into that data, it's primarily females. So it's even a smaller percentage of males. And so we need to know more about that. Participation and completion of high demand career pathways. We know students who complete their career pathways often lead into degrees or additional stackable credentials that prove to be quite successful into that post-secondary world. We didn't talk about career pathways and where that's taking us and what we're doing in the state, and we're quite the model for a lot of our efforts. When we talk about applying to post-secondary, so we talk about it, ESG shared early on, back in a year ago, that if students apply, I think to two or more institutions, they have a greater possibility of enrolling. And so how many of our students even are applying, and who are they? Who are applying? Who's completing the FAFSA? We know our overall, we know our counties. We can look down at this town, we can look at the county, we can look at the district, we can look at the state overall, but who are we talking about? And are we continuing to push the same ones to apply and we continue to leave the same ones out? So we haven't really talked about what students, and anytime we're doing any type of real change, it is so important to humanize things. And we are talking about students. We are talking about young men and women that have names and faces and have an opportunity. Well, we want them to have an opportunity to go. And so we need more information. How many are admitted to a match post-secondary institution? When we talk about enrolling and transitioning, how many are going immediately? And then what is that gap for those who are not? What's happening? We know we have a ridiculous amount of data, but have we dug deep into asking these questions? Because these are the questions that continue to be brought up in our work groups. And then who are successfully completing gateway courses within the first year? So these are just the beginning pieces that I want you to start thinking about. But I'm going to put a pause on this and actually turn it over to Lauren Norton from ESG, our good friends from ESG that you all have gotten to know, to really give some background into why these metrics and then other things we can consider, because this is where it's going to really be a little bit organic in how we move forward with determining work groups. Last year was pretty structured, but we really want this to drive into the direction that we need to go to figure out some of the questions that we didn't have answers to when we talk about when we're dropping in enrollment, or we don't have enough participation in certain things, or we're seeing a drop or we're seeing an influx. Who are we talking about? Where is this happening? And so then that's how can we better address the situations? So Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Amanda, before you turn it over to Lauren, we have Lieutenant Governor on here, but I want to say something even before I invite her to say something. I think also a couple other things we want to talk about somewhere along the way. We really are in need of more STEM related people coming through the system, STEM help. We're in need for more people of color to come through. We see the effects of dual credit on people of color and low income, but we're not getting enough of those in the pipeline, right? I mean, I keep on going forever with this. So as we think about this, Lauren, as you talk about it in a second, I hope we would be thinking specifically, right? How do we build this pipeline of those needed areas for our workforce in the state? Not
Yes.
we talk about teacher diversity, but we have to get STEM diversity. We have to get more STEM, period. Have to get more women in STEM. I keep on going forever with this. So we're pretty soon are going to have to get down to some of that level of conversation. And we have resources at hand, like our dual credit scholarship, work ready stuff, and so on to make that happen. But I think we have to pause, or Pada, I think we have to be very specific, David Horseman, all those who are on here, to really talk about really those huge gaps that we've talked about for a while that we haven't addressed it. Lieutenant Governor, good to see you. I hope the baby is doing well. And we are welcoming you on board. We've been using your name in vain a lot, by the way, but I promise you, no matter what Susan said, it was all good. So we'd like for you to say something to us if you would like.
Hard for me to keep her in line, Aaron, you know that.
I know.
Well, hello, good afternoon, and happy first of the year, everybody. I was listening. I had my trusty AirPod in. I was putting Evelyn down. I think she's down now, so I'm good for a little while. But I heard your all's takes on the kind of the accomplishments and where we've been and where we're going, and I just appreciate it so much. I know Dr. Thompson always talks about how it's nice to have people in the administration who value education, and it is just really nice for me to be able to hear folks who feel the same way, and so that's always great. I have a little bit different perspective than you guys do, just by virtue of where I sit, but I think about how difficult we make things and how sometimes we drill down and get in the weeds and get lost in terms of like really what is our purpose and are we getting distracted by things that shouldn't be distracting us and things like that. And it makes me think about how in the last year we have an economy that is, I mean, the governor says it all the time, it's on fire. It's if I was not sitting in the room when these deals were made, I think I would wonder how in the world this is happening. But we had over $11 billion worth of investments last year. We created over 18,000 new jobs in Kentucky. And I'm not talking like minimum wage jobs. I'm talking jobs in Henderson that start at $39 an hour before benefits, right? We obviously know about the huge Ford plant that's going to be coming to Glendale and all of the excitement around that. And I just keep thinking about how that first group of employees that Ford is going to hire is probably 15 to 18 years old today. And I think about how those are the jobs of the future, right? We are the place that Ford bet their future on for electric vehicles and the future of the most American company that exists, right? And so it's a great opportunity for us, but it also presents us, in my opinion, with an opportunity to do the things we've always wanted to do, right? Because the future is here. And I think if, of course, the state of the Commonwealth address is going to be tomorrow night, so you all will be able to listen into that. The budget address is going to be next Thursday. That is still in the works. We meet about it every day, but I have to tell you, we have said we have education first budgets before. This budget, I don't even know what you would call this really, in terms of education. It is the most education supportive budget I could have possibly dreamed of. And I'm a teacher. So you guys know that as I sit in those meetings and I say, well, what if we did this? Or what if we thought about doing this? And then it happens. Because we have the funding to do it. It's more than I could have ever imagined. I cannot wait for you all to tune in. I am not a numbers person, but this budget makes me very, very happy. And I think and I mean like all along the continuum, when we talk about education, not just certain pieces of it, but there's a lot of good news coming and there is a lot that we're going to be able to do together. And I think about having this group to steer this ship and to make sure that we're doing things in the right way and we're focusing on the right things and we're building that true continuum into a pipeline that will feed those jobs of the future. It really does give me hope. But I think when I think big picture, this is what I think of in terms of trying to not make this more complicated than it actually is. Education is an issue that should unite all of us. It is the foundation of our economy. It is about our kids. And everyone who, to me, carries the torch for education should be operating with a kids first mentality. And I have to say that I learned that firsthand from Lou Young as a teacher in Jessamine County. So that kids first mentality is important. But there's two things that I think we're missing and that get lost in the rest of the conversation, because this is where we try to divide and conquer so often. One is, if we believe in serving our kids and putting them first, then we are obligated to take care of the people who take care of our kids. That is not hard at all. And so making sure that we truly build and invest in that community of people that rally around our kids when they need them the most is important. And last but not least, I think the very least we can do is give our schools the resources they need to do what we've asked them to do. Again, not hard, not rocket science. And so as much in the weeds as we tend to get, because we're all education people, at the end of the day, when people try to start pulling us one direction or the other, or focusing on this issue that it isn't really important, but they're trying to divide and conquer with it, we all just go back to that. Does this policy put kids first? Great. Does it take care of the people who take care of our kids? Awesome. Does it give the resources to the schools to do what we've asked them to do? Perfect, right? Like, those are ultimately the areas that we should be moving in. And so I'm just really thankful to be with this group, to have the partners that we have in doing this. I can't imagine doing it with any other group, because you guys are just like all stars. But I think you're going to be really, 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 really happy with the budget, especially you, Dr. Thompson. You're the numbers guy. I don't like to count on my fingers really, but you'll really like it when you hear it. So just tune in for that next Thursday.
See, that's why I wanted her to talk. I knew she'd make me happy somehow. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. We really do. I'd say we do appreciate what the governor and you and others are doing over in the executive branch around education. I'm not sure how long I'll be doing education from this standpoint, but I have to tell you, it was nice going through this. I will just say that at a personal level. So, Lauren, I know you're going to talk to us, so I will turn it over to you.
Appreciate it. And Amanda, confirming we are ending in 3 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, if we can extend 15 minutes, if you were able to stay, we would greatly appreciate it. And if you can't, we completely understand, but this has been even more robust. And so, but we will have this recorded and we'll share all of the resources if you do have to hop off it too. So
appreciate it. All right, I'm going to share my screen and I will start with some context setting for everyone, for those of you who are able to stick with us at least for the next couple minutes. So as Amanda shared, when you all started this work just a year ago, you had set the state's post-secondary attainment goal in really supporting students in equitably accessing and attaining a post-secondary credential and workforce and life success as your North Star, and what drove you to develop all of the recommendations that were shared earlier today. This chart, I think, demonstrates why you all made that commitment in your first year. We've seen nationally that over the past few decades, states across the country have really committed to increasing the number of students who are graduating from high school. But at the same time, we're seeing that fewer and fewer students are continuing their education and training after high school, are entering the workforce at lower rates than we've seen before. And so you all really rallied behind that charge, seeing data like this 1 year ago to figure out how you can support more of Kentucky students and families to having post-secondary success. So to bring us back to kind of where we are this year, we know the pandemic has made that challenge even harder. The National Student Clearinghouse recently released this data for fall 2021. Post-secondary enrollment is continuing to decline. In total, we've seen a nearly 8% decrease in post-secondary enrollment since the start of the pandemic. And we're particularly seeing that among male students, white, Black, and Native American students, and students attending two-year colleges, which I know a number of Kentucky students are reflected in those demographics. We're also seeing even more significant declines in freshman enrollment. So for students attending college for the very first time, overall have seen a over 13% decline in enrollment since the start of the pandemic in 2019. Good news, bright spot, Kentucky continues to be slightly above average. So as you see on this map here, Kentucky is kind of a light orange, with dark orange meaning more significant declines, and the blue seeing actually increases. So just a couple states have seen increases in the past couple of years, but still seeing overall a 2% decline in undergraduate enrollment over the past couple of years, meaning that there are still students that we're all seeking to serve and wanting to support their post-secondary success. So for those of you that need to drop, just want to preview where you can learn more about the resources I'm about to share. So in August 2020, ESG released a report based off of some research we have done, recognizing that we're seeing some of these declines in post-secondary enrollment and success, and wanting to learn more about districts, institutions, charter organizations across the country who are kind of bucking that trend and really finding some success in using data to provide support to students, particularly for low-income students and students of color, and promoting their post-secondary success. So if you go on our website, the link is on the bottom. We'll make sure that these get sent out after the meeting, have not only the report, but a number of other resources, including case studies, and a set of recommendations for what state leaders such as yourselves can do to be able to use these metrics to drive improvements, a number of infographics and things that you can use in advocacy, a number of other tools. So I encourage you to check those out. But to give you a little bit of a primer, we started our research with examining data from every single state who tracks post-secondary enrollment data that's disaggregated by race and ethnicity and income, which ends up being about 30 states. Kentucky is one of them. What we found was that, unsurprisingly, where a student goes to school and what their background is significantly influences whether they make that transition to post-secondary education and training. And we identified 7,000 what we call coin flip high schools, where if you are Black, Hispanic, or from a low income family, your chance of proceeding into higher education directly after high school is less than 50%. And so that motivated us to ask, all right, well, where are those places where students are having that success regardless of what their background might be? And so that led us to identify what we call the momentum metrics. Amanda shared these a little bit earlier. And this is really driven by research that we did from the field. So learning from these places that are having success, and then coupling that with what does the academic research say to reinforce why these metrics matter. So we're really looking to see what are the data that they're tracking, what are the supports that they're providing to students around promoting their post-secondary access and attainment. And so you can see what those metrics are here on the screen. Again, some of these, the Continuum has been prioritizing over the past year in your work. So the early post-secondary opportunity group started to delve into potential for advanced coursework. You know, the successful transition to post-secondary work group has some recommendations around FAFSA completion, as well as seamless enrollment with the summer bridge recommendation and some of the advising support as well. But we also heard from you, we need to dive deeper. We know these aren't the only issues that we need to be addressing. And so I wanted to share a little bit about kind of the research and the why behind some of these other metrics that we've included here. So for ninth grade on track, we know it's important for students to start high school off on the right foot. We found that ninth grade students who are on track are 3 times more likely to graduate from high school. And ninth grade GPA is also predictive of 11th grade GPA, which we know is important as students start to apply to college, post-secondary enrollment, and first year retention. So it has kind of long-term effects for students as they make that transition into post-secondary. We define in the report ninth grade on track primarily related to GPA, but we found a number of sites include other on track metrics, including the number of credits they've completed throughout ninth grade, the number of course failures, particularly in core subjects, as well as attendance as being key indicators for being on track in ninth grade. Potential for advanced coursework. Again, this includes, as Amanda shared, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, Cambridge, dual enrollment, career pathways, any opportunity that students have to earn early post-secondary credit while they're still in high school. A number of studies have found that students who participate in advanced coursework are more likely to enroll in, persist in, and complete a post-secondary degree or credential. A report in Colorado also found that students who participate in dual credit have higher workforce earnings 5 years after their post-secondary graduation, so long-term effects into the workforce. Kentucky also has strong data. I think we've shared the report from CPE with this group before. They found that participation in dual enrollment led to higher first-year GPAs in college and higher rates of persistence to the second year of college, particularly for low-income students. And so the idea behind potential for advanced coursework is something that the EPO work group started to touch on, but this is really driving towards how can we support students earlier, even before ninth grade, to be able to encourage them to participate in the wealth of opportunities that Kentucky schools provide to earn that early coursework. High quality pathway participation, again, this is a kind of new thing, not something that's new for Kentucky, but something that's new for the Continuum's priorities that you all may wish to consider. Career pathways lead to students being more likely to graduate from high school, enroll in post-secondary, and receive higher compensation after high school. So that strong opportunity for students there. In terms of application, a couple different metrics that we included. College application, so Amanda shared this stat I think is really interesting from the College Board. Just switching from a student completing one application to two applications increases the probability that they'll enroll at a post-secondary institution by 40%. And in fact, 9 in 10 students who submit at least 2 applications end up enrolling in a post-secondary institution immediately after high school. So really encouraging students to apply to multiple institutions. And then also recognizing where students go to college ultimately impacts if they're going to be successful. And we know that students of color and low-income students tend to be referred to as undermatched at institutions that tend to have less resources to be able to support them in their educational journeys. So College Match really emphasizes promoting students persisting in their college coursework. FAFSA completion, you all know about. I know the state has prioritized a number of different initiatives in the past year. I'll share some data on the next slide on the impact those initiatives have had over the past year. We know FAFSA is important because it's one of the leading indicators that students will end up enrolling in post-secondary after high school. And as they continue to receive financial aid, some studies have also shown the impact of FAFSA completion on persisting in their college coursework and eventually obtaining a degree. So 90% of students who complete the FAFSA enroll in college immediately after high school, compared to just 55% of non-completers. So if you look at where Kentucky is, this is as of just before the holidays. If you notice, Kentucky is the orange line, the national trend is the blue line. Kentucky continues to be above the national curve. So generally seen after declines during the last FAFSA cycle, seeing improvements year to year this cycle. So generally about 4.5% up from last year's rates, with about 35% of high school seniors having completed the FAFSA thus far. So I think all of the hard work that the state put forward to increasing FAFSA completion really drove a lot of this. And so definitely commendable for everyone involved in that this year. And then the last two, these are as students begin to transition into post-secondary, so seamless enrollment. We know that the longer students take between high school graduation and enrolling in a post-secondary institution, the less likely they are to be able to make that transition. So seamless enrollment is really important for making sure that students persist and attain a post-secondary credential. And then gateway course completion. So this refers to those kind of entry level, primarily English and math courses that most students need to be able to successfully pass in order to graduate. Students who complete those gateway courses in their first year attain a post-secondary degree at a 20% higher rate than their peers who either wait to take those courses in their second or third year or don't end up passing those courses at all. So important to encourage students to complete those early. So with that said, these are just 8 metrics that we chose to prioritize in our report, but we've worked with a number of other states across the country who are leading P20 efforts, just like Kentucky, or who are building kind of cross-sector data dashboards to be able to figure out all along the students' educational journey, how they can meet their state's post-secondary attainment goal. And so I've listed a couple other metrics that you all might want to consider as you all kind of narrow your priorities for your focus area this year. Starts all the way in early childhood, recognizing that we need to prepare our learners early if they're going to make it into post-secondary. So some states have prioritized access to early care and education, kindergarten readiness, in elementary and middle, things like reading and math proficiency and social emotional learning. In high school and post-secondary, a couple additional metrics, things like social capital, so making sure that students have the relationships they need to be able to be successful. A lot of the advising work I think that the Continuum has done kind of promotes that idea. Credit mobility, so are the credits that students are able to earn either in high school or once they enter post-secondary able to transfer and have mobility across institutions across the state. Just like ninth grade GPA is important, first year college GPA we know is also important for getting off to college on the right foot. And then also in workforce, we had you all complete a survey before the holidays on what you viewed as the most pressing issues for the state. Workforce came up a lot. And so some states have started to track labor market alignment. So are the education systems preparing the workforce that the state ultimately needs for its high demand, high wage fields? What does labor force participation look like? What do median earnings look like? Essentially, how are we preparing students kind of across the continuum to make sure that they are able to meet the continuum's goal of attaining a post-secondary degree and having a strong workforce success? And so I have a couple recommendations. These are directly from the report, but as I was reading through them, had a lot of connection to what I've heard from you all on the continuum's goals. One, we've heard for let's really dive deeper into the data and use data to drive where we're kind of prioritizing our efforts to know what our most pressing needs are for our students, families, and communities. So using the measures to track progress towards meeting the state's post-secondary attainment goal. So being able to identify some of those leading indicators that I shared earlier. Creating incentives for districts and institutions to set and meet whatever goals that the P20 has set. Analyzing statewide data to identify and promote bright spots. Kentucky, I know, has a ton of bright spots. We learned that in our stakeholder engagement from last year, and as all the work group members have shared. And so being able to learn from what's working well in Kentucky and how we can continue to scale that across the state. Targeting supports using what we know works. Creating supportive policies, that's key, developing policy recommendations. And then also a couple of recommendations came out from last year around how can you create peer learning networks amongst districts or institutions that really want to kind of prioritize some of these metrics, and how can we learn from each other and support each other. So with that said, I think we'll probably not have time for this, but I will preview it to you and we can send it out after, and would encourage you all to complete this very, very quick poll to be able to let us know where, if you're going to identify what are Kentucky's momentum metrics, they might include some of those 8 that we have in our report, but they likely include others. So would love for you to kind of vote on what you think are the most pressing priorities for the state. So you can see, if you have a phone on you, you can scan the QR code and that will pull up the poll. Otherwise, the link is here and we'll include it following the meeting for you to complete later. But want you to think through, as you make your selections, which of the metrics are most impactful for promoting the preparation, enrollment, and success for post-secondary education and training for students, recognizing that's the Continuum's focus area, which resonate most with you and the community that you serve, what would address your community's most pressing needs. And then lastly, which metrics does the Continuum have the most ability to influence through its collaborative efforts? So where can you guys really make change by working together over the next year? So I've preloaded the poll with the metrics that I shared with you today, but there's also an option on the poll, if you see here in this blue add option button, to add your own. So Dr. Thompson could add his kind of STEM workforce pipeline recommendation here, and that could be one of the metrics that we prioritize. So we, again, greatly appreciate just a couple minutes to complete, and we'll make sure you guys have that link following the meeting. I'll go and stop sharing. I see we have some comments in the chat, so I'll pull that up, but otherwise I'll pass it back to you, Amanda.
Sorry, I've had too many clicks. So thank you, Lauren. If you'll put that link in the chat, and please, I just filled it out myself just to see. It's rather quick, but at least it'll send us in a direction. Next steps. First of all, I apologize for going over, Dave. I do think the conversation's been robust, and we definitely have some next steps. So what we will do for you is definitely pull together what we said on some common legislative agenda priority areas and how it aligns to the continuum. We'll work on that and be able to share. The other thing we will also do is send out the dates for this coming year for the continuum. We are trying to finalize the March date since it's a long session. March dates are very, very tricky. And so we are trying to find it where most can attend and avoid any committee meetings, which is really tough, but we're attempting to do that. And the other thing, just as we close out, is we definitely want you to fill out the survey and really help give us some direction on where to go. Our plan is once we get some direction is to actually pull together a data team from different agencies to pull that together and see what it looks like in Kentucky and start to get into the weeds a little more. That will help drive the conversation and next steps. So before we even establish work groups, we'll get the data that you all have selected, the areas that you think are the most impactful or the areas you find that need to be focused on. We'll do our homework before we reconvene, folks, and we'll definitely move forward in that direction. The other thing just to bring to your attention is if you are serving in a role that brings this role group to the table, if you feel like it is overwhelming or too much, we still want your seat at the table. We want you at the table, but if you feel like you really need to switch out with someone, let us know. There is no shame in that. Everybody is overworked and over inundated with lots and lots of things. We value you. We value your participation, and we want to keep that participation really high. We've been really grateful and blessed to have wonderful conversations and engagement. We want to continue that, and we want to engage and do even more of a better job, really being much more strategic in how we use your role, your voice, and the folks that you work with on a daily basis to get the message out, to collect feedback. And so if that's something that you've been considering or questioning, just reach out to me directly. I'm on the email, or you can send it to Joette for me to contact you. I'm happy to do that, but just wanted to give everybody that option. Otherwise, we will send out dates, the PowerPoints from today, and this URL link if you haven't already filled it out, and we will be in touch. So thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful remaining of the first week of the year.
Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon. Jenny, sorry I sent you a note like several weeks ago. Hope you got it.